Hey buds, fantasy cartographer Elder and Gildan here. Today, I will go over some tips and tricks to help you make good fantasy maps. I must say that I am not an expert with map making, but I know enough to share, and that is what I will do. If you are a writer, DM, or just a cartography fan, then this video will be helpful for you, or I hope it will be. In the background, I will be making a new fantasy map in Photoshop using the method described by Claymore Concepts that I am quite partial to. The only problem is that I am still not well versed in Photoshop, and I am using a mouse to draw, so I'm going to suffer. Now I have compiled what I believe to be the 5 most important tips to keep in mind for good maps. These are what I consider the foundations, the fundamentals, the meat and potatoes, the fospa and borscht, if you will. You know, the pillars of all maps. The first one being the purpose of your map. Is it for your reader to visualize your world, or is it for yourself to remember where things are? Is it a completely accurate world map, or is it a map of a specific region made by a certain people and thus biased towards their views? Why are you making it? What do you want to achieve? How it's made? Who are you and why are you in my house? Or to summarize, who is it for and what is it for? Answering those 2 questions before you start the actual drawing will greatly help you determine what you need to portray and in what way. For example, this map that I am currently making, its purpose is to show you, visually, one way to make a fantasy map, as well as to have an interesting background to this video that contrasts my dull voice. The second tip is where the real fun part of making these maps comes in, that being, familiarize yourself with geography. In the words of YouTuber Teching 101,
geography is everything!
And when it comes to maps, it really does. So it's important for you to make sure you are confident in your ability to make believable geography. To start with, coastlines. Coastlines are what shape your world. See what I did there? In order to make nice and crispy coastlines, there are a couple of general guidelines to follow. Firstly, no straight lines. The more unpredictable the coastline with plenty of bays, inlets, and peninsulas, the more striking and memorable it will be. Your coastline will be what holds your world together, so put extra care into its development. Sign it up for extracurricular activities, go to parent-teacher conferences, get involved in its life. I would suggest adding your inland seas, islands, and lakes during this phase as well. It's easier to draw those when your map is nice and empty. Once you have sculpted your coastlines, you can pat yourself on the back and start on the best part of fantasy map creation. The geographic features of your crafted world. The first and most important one being mountains. One of the most striking features of our own world, as well as in maps. Mountains are a great tool for interesting worlds. They are what divides the world into its distinct regions, much like what happened to my family after my parents' divorce. And unlike the breaking apart of my family, mountains are very pretty. Now, I would suggest that when you make your own map, it is best to place your mountains as early as you can, after coastlines, of course. Where you place your mountains is up to you, but there are some general guidelines most people follow. One of which is to keep your mountains in one line, or range, as they say, as can be seen by the Rockies. Mountains sprinkled across the land like lakes in Manitoba never looks good. To determine where these ranges lie on their maps, some people even create whole tectonic plate maps and simulations to make random and organic mountain ranges, although I prefer to just put them where I feel is best. The reason it is important to place your mountains first is that where mountains are placed greatly influences where other geographical features will be located. An example of this being the rain shadow effect, where one side of the mountain face gets the majority of the precipitation, creating wet regions on one side, such as the jungle, and arid regions on the other, such as a desert. Mountains are also important for the next geographic feature. Rivers. Now this one's a real goshtummel. Of all the features on a map, I have seen more errors and problems with rivers than any other. Problems like coast-to-coast rivers, perfectly straight rivers, ones that seem to have no source at all, and I've even seen some rivers that split in two to form two completely different rivers that end in different places, when in reality it should be that two rivers combine into one larger one. Ugh, it gives me conniptions. So to prevent myself and others from going hollow, I will lay some general rules that can be attributed to all of your rivers. Firstly, rivers start at
The high ground.
And flow down into a body of water, whether it be a lake, ocean, or sea. Other tributary rivers may merge with a river anywhere on its way down. They never split in two, with the exception of a delta, which is when at the mouth of a river, it widens and sediment carried by the river creates many islands, small or large depending on its age. Finally, rivers are curvy boys, so don't be afraid to do some sick detours to get to your final destination. Just no loops, because they don't exist. So now that you've made your rivers, and you're getting tired of all the boring rocks and streams, you want kingdoms and empires on this landmass you have made, well, you're in luck, because now that you have done all the legwork, it will be intuitive to place this next feature that you've been looking forward to. Settlements. Cities, towns, villages, the local fortress of evil colloquially known as Taco Bell, they are all settlements, and if you ask me, they are my favorite part of fantasy map creation, because with every city and village you place is the potential for a new interesting culture and people. But before you start drawing capitals and towers, there are a couple things you gotta remember when it comes to any settlement. Firstly, it needs to be near fresh water and in a location with some crop growing capabilities. And those rivers you just made allow for both of them. You ever notice that every single city in the world is on a river? It's no mistake. Special shout out to river deltas that make some of the most fertile land in the world, such as the Nile and the Ganges. If you want a particular city to be bustling with trade, put it on a coast next to a natural harbor like an inlet or bay, such as Seattle. A large and deep river would also work, like Montreal. Another factor to consider is if special resources with great economic value are nearby. If there's something people want somewhere, people will settle there. Mining towns and gold rush settlements are a testament to this. Wealth attracts all. Finally, there is my favorite factor for settlement placement. Strategic placement. A city controlling a mountain pass or strait can become very wealthy, taxing travel through it. Constantinople was such a monolith of a city in its day precisely because it was located on the crossroads between Europe and Asia, with the Black Sea to the north and the Mediterranean to the south. When it comes to settlements, where they are located matters greatly. Moving away from geography, finally, the third tip I have to share is as such. Keep your names believable and consistent. Good names for locations are vital if you wish for people to remember them. The better the name, the easier it will be to remember. But what makes a name good? Well, if you ask me, I would say it would have to roll off the tongue easily and be distinct enough from its peers. There is also the problem of being too unique when it comes to names. It can make them practically unpronounceable to anyone. As a general rule of thumb, if it looks Welsh, don't use it. Simple names are quite often the best route to take. For instance, I would consider King's Landing a great name, and it's only composed of two common English words. But because of the history behind the name and the nice way it sounds, it becomes an iconic and great location name. On another note, an important factor to remember is keep your names culturally consistent. Settlements in a single nation should sound like they have a common linguistic root compared to one located across the world. It doesn't feel quite right for the capital of Al-Bashar to be named Georgetown, or that Zanwefu is the capital of the nation of Cornwall. Doesn't make any sense. For nation names, keep in mind the purpose and viewpoint of your map from the first tip, so you can determine whether to use an exonym or an endonym. Exonyms are names that outsiders give to a place, while endonyms are the names that people give to themselves. Some examples include Finland and Suomi, Georgia and Sarkatvelo, and of course Germany and Deutschland! Tip number 4. Give it some style, baby. Colors, textures, art style. Do what you gotta do to make it happen. I put the win in swinger, baby, so I always go for that classy parchment look. But whatever you like, you do it, baby. No holding back, just you and that canvas, yeah. Borders emblazoned, title position, dragons here be, Hotel Trivago. Don't forget about the compass rose, people. It's what brings the map its mojo. Man, I love some good compass roses. Oh yeah! Now this fifth and last tip kind of contradicts the other four. It's get creative. This is fantasy after all, and if you have an idea that goes against all laws of nature, then just justify it with magic or something. It's better to have an unreal and interesting world than a realistic and boring one. So all of my tips and tricks I have said previously can be thrown out if you want. After all, I support any creative fantasy map ideas. It's what makes fantasy so great. Well, unless it's a south-oriented map.
Degenerates like you belong on a cross.
With that, this little tips and tricks video is over. So you can all go back to doing what you were just about to do before I stole your time like the villain from the worst Spy Kids. Like, you can read a book, watch a movie, hang out with your mom, I don't know. If you enjoyed this video, then consider subscribing for more. Also, follow me on Twitter